Yeah, but this one goes to 11. Well, 46%. Hello and welcome back. We've got another Smokehead this time, but this one is a little bit more exciting. This is something new that's popped up, at least online. I haven't seen this in any shops yet. As far as I'm aware, it is very new. This is Smokehead Unfiltered. In theory, this is Smokehead, but completely unafraid of what it says. Not afraid of hurting anyone's feelings or taste buds. Colour scheme on this one, it's a little bit unusual. Smokehead obviously normally comes in the metal tubes, and they're normally darkish colour schemes, going for that kind of rock metal kind of aesthetic. With this one, it is probably more different than any of the ones that have gone before. They're usually dark tubes, so we've had the rum, the sherry and stout and all that. So green on white this time, which is a little bit unusual, but I guess eventually they're going to run out of colours because they've already had sort of brown, red, purple, orangey yellow. I do think that it's interesting that they've gone with a white background on this one though, because it does kind of set it out from the rest of the product line, and that's probably for good reason, because as I said, this is Smokehead Unfiltered, so that's implying that it's a more raw and natural whiskey than what we've had from them in the past. It's also worth noting that the ABV on this one, whereas in my last review I talked about how the old 43% Smokehead seems to have gone down to 40%, which is terrible news. This one is offered at a very respectable 46%. It's not the first time we've had a decent ABV in a Smokehead release, because we've had 48% for a lot of releases like the Sherry Bomb, and off the top of my head I think the Rum Rebel and the 18-year-old Extra Rare, or whatever that was called, Black. They were decent ABVs, but this is the first time we've had a decent ABV in a standard Smokehead. As for what it actually means that they've called this Smokehead Unfiltered, it does also say on the bottle here, unchill filtered. Now I suspect that what they actually mean is that it's not literally unfiltered. I think what they mean is that it's non-chill filtered or barrier filtered, because from what I can see there's no debris in the bottle with this one, so I think that it's just lightly mechanically barrier filtered rather than chilled and pressed through those paper filters. Although if you get some of this and leave it in a glass for a few minutes, you don't even have to add water. Just being exposed to the air, it does get very, very cloudy. So 100% believe them that this is a proper non-chill filtered product. Let's just get some in the glass. Obviously no age statement on this one, but I think that it's probably safe to say that it's around about the same as the 43% Smokehead, which in my opinion is probably a little bit under 10 years. Doesn't mention whether there's colouring in this one either, but looking at the colour of that, as I said in my review for the re-review for the Smokehead at 43%, on Whisky Base it does say that this is, or the standard one is uncoloured. I don't really believe that. The colour that we're getting in the glass for this Smokehead Unfiltered, the colour of that, I would expect that to be either sherried or at least very heavily oaked. There's lots of active oak gone into this one to get a whiskey that colour, and it's not either of those things. And this Smokehead Unfiltered, it actually appears to be noticeably a shade darker than the 43% version as well. Now that may just be because we've got more spirit in the glass than water with this one, but I think that as dark as this is, and the fact that it's noticeably darker than the standard Smokehead, I think we've probably paid for that non-chill filtration by ending up with a little bit more caramel in there, because I think this is now probably around about in the ballpark of the colour that you get on like the Lafroig 10 cask strength. Anyway, let's see how it noses. Lovely coastal maritime salinity on the nose of this one. Lots of notes of briny rock pools and the seashore at low tide. Quite mineral, dry and bracing, but also with that really nice sweet medicinal vanilla peat. It's that familiar barbecue, wood smoke, mesquite note that I get on the standard 43% Smokehead. Ashy wood smoke, slightly medicinal, with a note of tar on the nose. So, very nice. Let's see how it tastes. So pretty similar grind on this one. On the palate, sweet but with a nice ashy peat. Quite an oaky presence on this one. Quite a similar to what I got on the Smokehead, and a similar flavour to what I get on quite a few batches of the Laphroaig 10 cask strength. There's quite a dense oakiness, a chewy, slightly spicy, just really good body from that oakiness on the palate. I think that the spirit on this one has become a little bit more acidic and a little bit more tart than what you get on the 43%. I'm getting sort of a note, rather than oranges, more of a sort of peated lemon note. Also a little bit of grapefruit and some more of that lovely industrial dirty peatiness. So some fumey notes, sort of paraffin firelighters, a little bit of a TCP note on the palate, as well as some herbal notes of things like clove and mint. Going to have one more sip and look at the finish. So, tail end of the palate and the finish, more of that sweet vanilla peat, quite intense peaty notes, but all kept nicely in balance, quite salty and quite ashy. So, in my opinion, this does again seem like that kind of familiar Smokehead recipe where you're getting a Laphroaig style, in my opinion, Kalila whiskey. So I think this is probably Kalila spirit, probably a little bit under 10 years old, finished in some active, probably first fill bourbon casks. I think that if you like the standard Smokehead at 43% or the Smokehead high voltage, you're going to absolutely love this. I think that it's more intense than the standard 43%, as you'd expect for the extra 3% ABV, but also without being sweeter. I think that there's a greater focus on the fruity spirit side with this unfiltered release. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because I do actually think that the 43% version, because it's got that little bit of extra water added in, it does possibly bring out the smokier and salty notes at the expense of that fruity spirit and body. But what you're getting with the 46% unchiltered version, you do lose a bit of that raw smokiness, but you get to experience more of that fruity spirit. And I think that the palate, the intensity, as well as the complexity too, of the 46% just destroys its weaker cousin. Especially if you leave some of this Smokehead Unfiltered in a glass for a little while to breathe. That extra oxidation, it does make the peat fall away even a little bit more, which really highlights those sharp, fruity citrus notes. And that does make me wonder if something that is quite often mentioned online is true about this, that Smokehead is either single malt whiskey from one distillery, finished in casks from a different distillery. If a largish part of the smoky peatiness in this whiskey is coming from a secondary maturation, a shorter maturation, a cask finish in a different distillery's casks, that might explain why a lot of that peatiness seems to fall away after you leave it for a few minutes. I wouldn't be at all surprised if this is Kalila finished in a Laphroaig cask with those tarry, oily notes. I also wouldn't be surprised if there were some Lagavulin casks in there. Something that's often mentioned on online forums and whiskey base and things is Ardbeg casks. Absolutely possible, although me personally, I think that sweetness, that sweet vanilla peat, and that mint note in particular really makes me think of Laphroaig. So as for a grade on this one, I'm going to go with a high B+. So that's the same grade that as I gave to the 43% Smokehead, but I do think that this is quite a step up. It's a noticeable improvement over the standard stuff. I'd say that low B+ on the 43%, so still really good, but high B+, edging closer towards a low A on the unfiltered version. I actually think that this new 46% non-chill filtered Smokehead is really getting quite close to what we're seeing from the Laphroaig 10 cask strength these days, especially considering that I do think that some of the recent batches of Laphroaig 10 cask strength have been edging towards the sweeter, milder, more sanitized side. Now, yes, the extra ABV on the Laphroaig 10 cask strength is really nice, and there's absolutely no substitute for that 50 plus ABV. But especially if you're the kind of person that's buying your cask strength whiskey and adding a teaspoon of whiskey anyway, I think that the flavours and the experience that you get from this one at a much lower price are on a very similar level. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this review. Let me know what you think of Smokehead Islay Single Malt in the comments if you've had this one in particular, but what you think of the entire range. Thanks for watching and cheers.